Hello and welcome to Outside is Overrated Game Club. Today we're discussing Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes by 505 Games. I'm your host, Tom Sedlacek, and joining me for the discussion tonight are regular co-host, the Hobby Box Joe Burns.
Heyo.
And good friend of the show, John Munch.
Howdy.
Also joining us today are OiO Patreon supporter Mike Mathwig.
Gentlemen.
In this monthly segment, we play a game with our community and invite our Patreon supporters to join the discussion. If you want to join us, support Outside is Overrated on Patreon at www.patreon.com/OIO. That's patreon.com/OIO. You can help for as little as $2 a month. We're going to start by setting some expectations here. Here's what we're going to cover for Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes Part 1. We're going to talk about the battle system, the upgrade systems, the early story and characters, and the strengths and weaknesses we've observed from this game over our first play session with it. Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes is a classic JRPG, a term that Burns holds near and dear to his heart, presented in a slick, shiny new format. On a scale of 1 to Surge, John, how addicting is the core gameplay loop?
This is Squirt Grapefruit Soda, which is an acquired taste.
Sounds gross.
You can't get enough, right?
Mike, where's it coming down the soda scale for you?
Maybe it's bubble up. You know, it's not Mountain Dew, but it's still pretty good.
Burns?
So I put it as a cold, refreshing Mountain Zevia. So no worries about all the sugar and stuff like that. But not necessarily my go-to soda either.
Yeah, I drink a lot of Zevia. I've never had a Mountain Zevia. I put down Mr. Pibb. Not spectacular, not flashy, certainly not Gal Gadot, but, it's solid. I enjoy it. I won't say no to it. Mr. Pibb. In typical JRPG fashion, in Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes, you're controlling a party of characters making turn-based decisions on how to attack. Joey, you've played the most recent Suikoden games, or you've played the Suikoden games most recently in the last 5 years or so. Is this turn-based battle system still fun?
I mean, I think it's fun just because it's familiar more than anything. Eiyuden Chronicle definitely doesn't. It definitely doesn't reinvent the wheel in any way, shape, or form. And it doesn't also require a whole lot of tactical know-how, at least. And caveat it where I'm a third of the way into the game, maybe a little bit around there. According to my PlayStation, I'm at 33%. And so, a lot of the difficulty or the strategy with it comes down to timing. So looking at where you're at in the order according to the enemies, and if you got to get heals out, trying to get them out earlier, and then making sure you're trying to get attacks on enemies before they attack so you can try to mitigate the amount of damage coming back to your party. So far, I haven't run into, or at least I haven't noticed, ways to really exploit elemental weaknesses or strengths a whole lot. There's lots of items for that stuff, so I'm guessing that as time goes on I'll be able to see more of an opportunity to do that. And I did definitely fight a boss that required that, but I definitely rolled into it with the exact wrong party for it, so I just had to brute force my way through it, and I made it. But yeah, so it's not like how the Persona series has pushed sort of turn-based gameplay forward, or even if you'd say Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Remake have pushed sort of turn-based strategy, though that kind of moves a lot more away from turn-based, but turns that strategy into something more modern. This is definitely harkens back to more old-school things like Suikoden 1 and 2.
So in a good way or a bad way? Are you enjoying the combat system?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I don't know that mileage is going to go the same length for people that aren't huge fans of turn-based RPGs, though. If you really only like action RPGs and you roll into this game, there's a 10% chance it's refreshing and it's interesting. There's a 90% chance it's just going to feel slow and boring.
Yeah, John, where do you come in at on the battle system? Are turn-based games still fun?
Yeah, they're still fun. I mean, this is kind of one of my favorite setups, right? You have sometimes you have everybody on the left goes, then everybody on the right goes. And I like the setups where you have a timeline and you can see, oh, okay, the enemies are going to go here, and here's where my guys go. So you have to plan your attack a little bit more. So that's fun. I will say that initially was kind of bored, right? I was kicking on the auto battler and just kind of letting things roll, and it was pretty boring.
And before you get into your next point, I see what you want to talk about next, and let's put a real quick pause on that. I'll also note that you're in about the same place as Burns and me in this game. You're in the first third-ish of the game. We're all around the proving grounds. Mike, you've beaten this game. What were your first impressions of the battle system?
I mean, they were definitely going for that classic Suikoden style. They weren't trying to do what the newest, hottest turn-based games like a Dragon are doing. I mean, this is definitely harking back to the old school, which is still fun. But I agree, it's not gonna make anybody who doesn't already like that style of game sit up and take notice. But they weren't trying to do that. They're playing it safe.
And thankfully, I like this style of game, so I'm having fun with it, but ironically, it made me wish for a system from a game I didn't particularly care about in Octopath Traveler. I liked Octopath Traveler with the, you built up like the gems and you could spend them to do like an overpowered attack. I just really wished for some wrinkle on the turn base. But John, there is a system with the battling that you leaned into a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the Gambit system and how you used it.
Yeah, so like I said, you can do auto battling, which at first I was like, oh, man, well, everything's super easy, right? I'm just pushing auto battle and it goes, kill, kill, kill. And eventually I started started to slow down, right? And my guys started to, get beat up a little bit more.
Burnsy, did you like the auto battling in the early game? Because we had a very similar experience with this. You hit auto battle and what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I only did it once, and I didn't want to go back into it. But yeah, then it's like they burn all of the SP that they have, which is basically sort of the things that they build up so they can do special actions. And so it's just like, no, I'm saving that for something that actually needs it, not this like half-cracked egg that takes like a stiff breeze to kill,
Yeah, I was in the same boat as Burns, but John, tell us more about the Gambit system.
Yeah, but enter the Gambit system, right? That solves that problem. Out the gate, your guys are going to just do whatever they want, all right? And they're just trying to kill whatever's in front of them as quickly as possible. But the Gambit system, much like in Final Fantasy XII, right, kind of lets you pick and choose how your individual characters. So you can say, hey, this guy, I don't want them to use any SP, or only use the minimum amount of SP, or don't use any MP, don't cast any spells unless I tell you to. Or only cast healing spells when people are, at 30%. So you can start to, tweak it a little bit to where you can say, hey, I'm going to make that 30% my top one, and then I'm going to have my healer, and then I'll just do normal attacks, right? And you can rank your moves. And it gets you to a little bit more of a fun system to me where, look, turn-based battles are fun, but pressing fight 6 times because you have 6 characters you're planning out, right? It's nice to be able to say, I'm going to throw an auto battle because you know what, 90 to 80% of the time, this is what my opening moves are going to be when I'm fighting just trash mobs.
It's funny that you bring up how irritating it is to press fight 6 times in a row. Like, I fell into that earlier. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to burn my SP. It takes too long to press X for each of the 6 characters because there's just a tiny bit of lag as each one of their menus loads up. Burnsy, do you see yourself investing time in the Gambit system, or are you going to keep rolling manually through the entire game?
I just want to put a quick clarification in there because we don't want to get Rabbit and Bear Studios sued by Square Enix, but it isn't called the Gambit system in this game. John's just calling it that because Final Fantasy XII called it that. So I just wanted to throw that out there quickly, but probably not. I very quickly fell into the same rhythm that I did with when I played through Suikoden 1 and half of Suikoden 2, in that I got pretty quick with, when it got to the point where I knew I was just going to be fighting, it would be click fight, pick a dude, click fight, switch to another dude, and try to spread my attacks out as strategically and quickly as possible. And then when you get to back row people that have like a long range, moving that to someone in the back. And so I'm not having a whole lot of issues with kind of just sort of that clicking through fight on a lot of guys. And like I said, we're getting into some more difficult stuff now. I said this before we recorded, but we're getting into more difficult stuff now, and so you actually do have to think about some of the things a little bit more. So it doesn't seem like I'm using a few more abilities depending upon what my group loadout is at the time. So it's not like I have to resort to that too much anymore. But it doesn't really bother me too much to just sort of have to click through fight, especially if there's one guy left and it's just like X X X X X X X X X X X X X until they start doing stuff and then I can stop. So it's not too bad.
Oh, that to me is the perfect time to do auto battle. There's one guy left, just press auto and you're done. Right? I press the button one time because I'm lazy, and like the guys will do what they want to do because your SP regenerates so quickly, right? So I'm like, yeah, use that stuff when you get it. Now, all of my SP moves only cost 2 or 1, right? So maybe we'll see when we get longer. I do want to save some of that to go over to the next battle, or save to the end, or switch it up once I get some different skills. But I haven't really seen that skill tree expand yet enough for me to be worried about burning 2 SP points.
Well, Mike, you've beaten this game. Does that skill tree expand?
It does. I mean, it's like everything in this game, you'll find it does expand, but it does it pretty slowly, and it takes a while to really get fully opened up.
Yeah, because if you look at the runes that are able to be equipped, you can kind of see what level the different extra skills are going to unlock for the different characters. But even with like the batch of characters that I'm playing with now are around like level 24. I have one character that has a 5 SP ability, which I could have triggered once, but I didn't want to because I needed the other abilities for that character at that point. And one of the other characters I have is 3 SP to launch into the special ability for that. So it's starting to get a little bit more where there's a little bit more variable with some of the abilities that they have and the cost for them.
And Mike, did you end up setting up many macros for your auto battle? I don't remember what the system is actually called. Like Gambit system is stuck in my head now, but did you use that auto battle feature very much?
No. I for me the fun in turn-based battle is as you get into an area and you know what you're fighting with the group you have, figuring out the most efficient way. Am I going to try to kill 2 enemies first turn, kill 2 enemies second turn, kill 2 enemies third turn, or am I going to try to stun 2 enemies first turn and spread my damage out so I can try to kill everybody in 2 turns? How many times can I prevent them from attacking? Just stuff like that. And Gambit system doesn't really let you do that. So I like to kind of, handle most of it myself, unless they're really weak. But nicely, this game lets you not fight really weak enemies if you don't want to.
You just let them run away. Go ahead, John.
Yep.
One thing that's interesting about that too, you'll notice is they scale the XP in an interesting way that I haven't seen in other games do. Right, so if you bring along, I mean, look, this is a Suikoden game, right? There's 101 stars to collect, right? So you're going to constantly be rotating your cast of characters, and they do a really cool thing where, if you have one guy who's level 25 and one guy who's level 5. Right, you'll see the level 5 guy gets like 4,000 experience, and the level 25 guy gets 10. Right, so they ramp up the experience for the lower characters, which I thought was really cool. It's like, yeah, this monster for the level 25 guy is nothing, but it's actually a pretty high-powered monster for the level 5 guy. So it's an interesting thing I hadn't seen or caught another game do in a while.
Yeah, Bernsey, given that you've played in the Suikoden games more recently, I feel like that is a holdover, because I remember finding a cook when my party was high powered and bring them out with me, and suddenly he's level 30. I'm like, all right, one fight, 30 levels, pretty good.
Yeah, it is sort of a holdover from that, because each level is always only 1,000 experience. It's just depending on what you're fighting, it's going to there's an algorithm that it figures out with that, and so. Like John said, the lower level you are, the more XP you get out of those fights. And the first time I bumped into that, where it's like, okay, I'm going to try to level a few of these people, and I get into a first fight and they get 4,000 experience. It's like, holy crap! Okay, well, let's go back to town, swap them out. I got them leveled.
Way to let you play with your party composition. Because, you kind of do want to try other people out to see what their unique skill is, or to see if you get a cool hero move, right? So I find that fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and, I mean, early on, so the way that you can do your party makeup is you have your 6 people that are your active fighters, and then you have one support slot that you can put characters into, and those will give you various abilities while you're out in the world. And so if you put somebody in, you'll find when you collect resources, you'll collect more food resources or more mining resources when you collect those nodes. But there is one that allows you to, at any save point, be able to reform your party, get the form party option at any save point. That's one that I'm going to probably keep in forever because it's just so nice to be able to be like, oh, okay, I got these people to like level 20. Now I'm going to swap out these other people and level them up through there, because that's like one of my favorite things from Suikoden is it's like, okay, this is the level band I'm at now with my like main people that I've been fighting with, so I'm going to get everybody else up to 20, go to this one spot where it's like 4 fights, they level up, and then swap them out, get new ones, and just kind of get them all so that they're staying within at least breathing distance if I need somebody else with their skills to pull up into the main party.
And I understand what you're doing there, Burns, but I'm taking a different tact. I am taking the Archer's sister, who gives you extra resources on every collection point, and I'm going to stick with her forever until like everything is built and maxed. Then maybe I'll swap her out for somebody.
Yeah, see, but the resources, if you like just wait for a little bit, like there's more again. You could just go collect the nodes again and again and again. So it's not like it's the end of the world. Plus, it does really, I've ran into it earlier in the game when I didn't know what to do with any of that stuff. And it was just like, all right, my resource pack is full and I need to collect more stuff. What do I do with this junk? Okay, it looks like I have like 10 bundles of stone. Let's discard a couple of those so I can like take this dead warthog and turn it into food, I guess. I don't know.
I will always hoard the resources forever. There's nothing particularly noteworthy about the way the progression systems in this game work. You fight monsters, you gain XP, and you level up. At certain thresholds, you unlock new rune slots for your characters. You buy new gear, and you find vendors to upgrade each character's unique weapons. John, overall, were you invested in the upgrade paths so far?
I mean, not really. I haven't been doing much with it, right? I mean, I found a couple rune lenses, and thrown, hey, my mage has some openings, so I'll toss them on here. Here's my guy that does damage. I'll throw, a power up on him. I think what I'm starting to see, though, as I'm getting further, is I'm starting to actually see skills that I want to give out to my characters, and I'm picking up those rune lenses. So I'm hoping that's going to give me more of that, like, oh, I want to like have this guy who has a skill that hits all my front row characters, and this hits characters in a line, and this and that. So I see where they're going, and I think it's kind of what Mike said. It's just slow rolling. So I think once I have that ability to have more lenses, then it will be fun to like say, oh, I'm going to start to swap. Now, I think the key thing, Joey, while you're saying a support character to swap your party members is cool, I'm hoping they have one that lets me swap lenses without going back, because that's another thing that's kind of like I don't like about the system is in order for you to change your lenses, which is how you pick your magic spells and your skills, you have to go back to town. You have to go to an actual rune vendor or go to the inn, right? And then say, yeah, change up my runes, and then you can go and you can swap them out.
And as of where I am right now in this game and about where Joey and John are, there is no fast travel. So if you want to go back to town, like you are hoofing it back to town, and that is not fun.
Yep, you're walking through like 3 dungeons, right, to get to where you need to go. So it's kind of fun the first couple times because I was like, oh, this is old school,
not.
right? Like, it's making me like walk, and I was like, and then no, because I've already been through these towns collecting all the characters, right? And I know that that's part of Suikoden, right? It's all right. You go back to these towns because new people show up, and after you collect stuff, you want to go back to see like how things have changed. So that's part of it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a fast travel option, which I see hints of. I believe there's like little like rune things I can see that's going to allow me to zap around places. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean Suikoden, and like I said, I've only played the first 2 games, but I don't know that it changes a whole lot. And it's kind of a danged if they do, danged if they don't system, because the whole game's kind of designed around going back to places you've already been and like finding people. And so if you're like skipping some of those just by teleporting back to your base and then teleporting to where you're going to like leave off from, it just opens up the opportunity that you're just going to miss those things. So I feel like they're kind of trapped there and they need to do a little bit with it. But yeah, every Suikoden, I believe, at least has some level of fast travel. It's still not like perfect compared to more modern games, but it exists. So I would guess Eiyuden's going to have that too.
So I started playing this game, and I'm like, I don't particularly like this. And so I was excited by the art style and running around. I'm like, oh, this feels like Suikoden. Well, why didn't I just go play Suikoden? So I fired up the Vita. I started playing Suikoden 1. And you're right, Burns. There's a lot of backtracking going back to town there. But the difference with at least the first Suikoden, areas are close. It takes a couple of minutes to get from like the main Imperial City to where the bandits are to the other place. You'll run into some monsters, you'll do a couple fights, but it's not that much of a time commitment. For better or for worse, Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes has a much bigger world. The fights take a lot longer because you have different options available to you, and it's just it takes a lot longer if you're going to walk somewhere.
Well, you got to get the speed rune on so that they move faster on the overworld as well as in the different individual maps too, because then at least you'll move a little bit faster. And when you're going through older places, most likely you don't even need to have any of those fights. You can just let the enemies flee and then move on your merry way. So it's a little bit less of a hindering factor. But I don't know, if we want to revisit the overworld map later, I do have some things that I'd like to share about that too.
Burns, I know when you play a game, you like to consume every piece of like content within that game, have every conversation, do every quest, cross everything off. When I'm playing a game like this, it is very hard for me to let enemies flee. Like if they are going to encounter me and trigger a fight, like they're going to die.
Even if you kill them and you get like 5 experience off of them, like what's the point?
I might need that 3 GP.
10 Bakwa.
That's actually a pet peeve of mine, though. Like when you have a game that says, "Hey, you know what? I know this enemy is beneath you, right? You should not have even shown me that enemy. Then just let me walk by him, right?" And some games have done that beautifully, where I think Dragon Quest does it, and some of the newer ones. I can't remember where I've seen it, but you see the enemies on the screen, and if you run into it, and it's something you could just obviously kill, you just kill it, and it's dead. Just don't. This is random battles. There's nothing that you see on the overworld map, so just don't have me attack that guy unless there's someone in my party that might benefit from it. If everyone's gonna get 1 hit point or 1 experience point, just don't show me that battle. Skip it.
Yeah, John and I are right. So another thing that bugged me early on in the game with the progression systems, at some point I'm sure we'll recruit a smith and we'll be able to go back to our castle and we'll be able to upgrade our weapons, and I will enjoy the heck out of that system. That'll be great. I'll have a big smile on my face. Early on in this game, you get kicked out of your town. It takes you a long time until you go back to civilization. There is no upgrading weapons in the interim, and that irritated me to no end.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just what these games are, though, Tom. I mean, the early parts of Suikoden 1 and 2, it's a lot the same. Until you get a blacksmith in your base, you're just beholden to whichever the highest level blacksmith was at whichever town, and going back there and then, sitting there and, as they called it in those games, sharpening for, 10 minutes at a time, swapping out your party members, bring the other ones over, ting, 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 ting.
I don't even mind being beholden, Burns. It's just when, after the story thing where you get kicked out of the first town and you can't go to a smith for a while, because I had new characters. I found the archer, I found a couple of other people, and their weapons weren't upgraded to the highest possible level at that point. But I couldn't go to a smith until I pushed the story a little bit further.
You can still go back to Eltisweiss.
Yeah.
Oh, well, shoot.
You can always go back to the town. They never stop you.
Nope.
You can they're like you're wanted from the law, and you walk back in and they're like, "Hey, how's it going? Have you seen this guy?" Right? It's pure JRPG stuff. No, you can get back in.
I had no idea. I never went back. I'm like, oh, well, that town is dead to me forever.
Yeah.
Huh.
I figured you didn't, since you said you haven't unlocked Begoma yet. So.
Oh, is that the miner?
No. Begoma is the first mini game that you unlock, which, from looking around at the internet for a little bit, is very infamous amongst the community.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't want to go down that road too far because it's not really for the early part of the game. But I have things to say about that game when the time comes.
Well, I mean, we're talking about it now. What is Begoma? Why do you guys hate this thing with a burning fiery passion?
I don't hate it, but just be aware, it's its own anime, is what it is.
Yeah.
It's flipping Beyblade is what it is. Literally, you have your spiky-haired rival. You have this old professor guy who's the kind of the mentor. You have a evil villain that pops in eventually.
I mean, it sounds like
destroying
X-Men,
the spirit of the discs, and it's a whole thing. It's insane how far that goes if you want to go down that rabbit hole.
And it would be amazing, except for they fumbled the execution of you unlocking it insanely. So you unlock it, you fight this battle against the person that's going to be like who you bump up against over and over and over again, I believe. And you get one, you sort of pick a starting Pokemon, Begoma, and then you get 2 training ones. And if you play anybody else with those Begoma, you're going to get smacked. You can't beat anybody. And so it's just like, you give me these tools and I can't succeed in any way, shape, or form, and it's just frustrating as hell.
No, there's one person you can beat with your starting setup. There's some little girl in some town who's even weaker than you are, and you can't beat her to get a new Begoma. And then you can go to the next weakest person and beat them. You got to figure out who the weakest person is. And eventually you start getting them dropped randomly in combat, and then you can start improving.
Let me go find all the little girls and beat them up and steal their tops. This makes me feel great. Right?
Nice job, girl.
I did not realize how deep that game went because I kind of ignored it for the most part. And then late game, I was kind of fiddling with the different side stuff just to see what it was like. And I started to realize where that game goes, and it's nuts how far they went into that if you figure it out. But it's not obvious that that's what happens. There's stuff there that it's kind of random almost, whether you get into the storyline of Begoma and this whole anime storyline that they put together for it.
Yeah, because I was like, after I found it and after I saw I did the opening stuff with it, I was like, okay, that's freaking awesome. Like, I can't wait to play this game. And then, I get curb stomped by the first 4 people I found to play the game against, and it's just like, okay. I was maybe close against one person, but...
just look at them and see what their Begomas are, and if they're better than yours, just cancel out. Because you can always tell if you have any chance to win or not, and there's no point in doing it if you don't have a chance to win, so you can just cancel.
Yeah, I found that out, and so basically I looked online just to sort of see where people were at, and most people I found on Reddit or GameFAQs had basically said, don't even touch the game until you get closer to end game, because by then you would have gotten some randomly in combat and you'll actually be able to beat people.
Yeah, you need to start getting into level 3s to even have really much of a shot to beat most of the people. So
yeah, sounds awesome. Well, speaking of awesome, let's talk about the story. You play as generic young white male hero Noah as part of the generic watch, guarding the generic little country who is invaded by the generic evil empire. What stands out among the early story and characters?
I wouldn't say it's generic. It's the Suikoden young white male hero Noah as part of the Suikoden watch, guarding the Suikoden little country. It's all the things that they've kind of always done, which is great. And I think the strength, especially of this game, it was the strength of all the Suikoden games, but the characters are all so interesting and distinct and have cool designs, and it's fascinating to me that you have a lot of other RPGs, and they struggle to make 8 interesting characters, and then you have Eiyuden who has 120 characters that you can recruit, and they're all kind of interesting and either distinctly have a distinct identity, have lines that are really, for the most part, well voice acted. And so I think that's really great. Some of my favorites are Francesca, who is the sweet-sounding healer with a mean streak, Kogan, the bandit leader that's instantly Noah's best friend, and then Leon, who just her constant needling of Noah is super entertaining through the first part of the game so far. So those are 3 of my favorite characters, only one of which is technically a main character in Leon. The other 2 are just basically side people, so... Yeah,
most of the time when Leon and Noah are interacting, I feel like it's us birds, except for maybe the flirting stuff to a lower degree. But just the constant...
So just like you and Burns then.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Francesca I like too, but she is a mainstay in my party because she's the healer. Gotta have the healer. But like her random yelling at like the end of battles is really irritating for me. Like I wish she had like 1,000 different lines of dialogue.
I think it's hilarious. I always laugh every time I hear her just freak
When she
out.
yells at him, and stay down. Come on, that's the best line she's got.
Yeah.
I only heard it
love
about
Francesca.
12,000 times. Oh yeah, she's the best of the early characters.
One of the best recruiting scenes in any game, period. I just, like, that whole point, and, like, you can't miss her, right? She's pretty much, like, the staple. Like, as you move through the story, you're gonna get Francesca. If I'm saying that right? You're gonna get her. So everybody gets to see her, and it's awesome. I'm not gonna spoil it. It's a great scene. I really liked her a lot, too.
John, who stood out to you from what we've experienced so far?
I really like in the beginning the Imperial Sane, right? I liked him with Noah, and they had some really cool scenes in the very beginning and how they set that up. I mean, I thought that the entire watch party in the very beginning was just fun, right? You got and like they right away jump you in, and you are like, hey, this isn't like just everybody's like this like, well, welcome to like Noah is like the generic Suikoden hero, which I actually loved, right? Like, oh, I know what I'm playing. Right, that's him. They pulled that right from. It's the same art style. It's everything, right? But then your party is like this big giant Fenrir wolf guy, right? And Leanne, this other girl. You have like I think it's Mia, who's like a samurai or some sort of ninja, right? So you have all these really unique characters that are really awesome. I think a couple of other ones. The one that I love is Yusuke, because he's basically Yusuke Urameshi from Yu Yu Hakusho, and I was like, oh man, he went to my party right away. I was like, yeah, he's got this sweet pink jacket. I'm like, oh, Yusuke, right? So he's awesome. All right, just everybody has personality, and that is what keeps me coming back.
I didn't enjoy the early part of this game, as I mentioned earlier, but what hooked me was Sane and Noah, because Sane is in a very similar boat to Noah. He's just from an established family. They're in a similar station, they're in rival countries, and like you see that they are on a collision course. And then they have an inevitable showdown, and then they're exiled from each other, but Sane's on the cover of the game, so I'm pretty sure he's coming back. And like, I hit that conflict at 5 hours. I'm like, oh, well, narratively I'm in. I can live with everything else because I really want to know what happens between Noah, Sane, this invasion, Perry. Like I'm still not super in love with the battle system, but the narrative of this game has me hooked. And then, Mike, who stood out to you amongst characters and story in the early game?
Well, I agree with Francesca being the best of the early characters, but I also really like, I can't remember his name, but the guy who's technically in charge of the watch when you start, and he's always being really passive-aggressive to Noah at the start of the game.
Yeah,
you have a little bit of feedback on your end. From our voices.
Me?
Yeah, when we speak, it seems to be coming back through your mic.
Is that me or Tom?
No, John.
Oh.
Yeah. Fancy new webcam, but it didn't come with earbuds, my dude?
No, but I can mute when I'm not.
Oh, well, now I have no retort.
But anyway, he is hilarious in the early game because he's just so snippy with everybody, especially Noah. Noah, of course, is the hero from the start and almost immediately gets thrust into the front, even though he really has no reason to be so. And Periel is great, too. I actually really like her as well, especially, you guys haven't got too far in, but what happens with her is really good, too, as the game progresses.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by her. She's a little abrasive at the start, but I see a lot of potential with her, and especially when her town is invaded and the way that she sends the party off. It's like, all right, I'm pretty invested in this character.
Well, and then like sort of what she does after that happens too. I think like immediately after that happens is like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. She takes no F's from anyone. So that's pretty awesome too. Yeah.
I'm also in love with the character design. I'm with you guys on the actual character design. I'm less enthralled with the voice acting because at the end of every battle, someone shouts something, and I have generally the same 6 people in my party because I have very specific skill sets that I want. But for me, the beauty of this game is really in the narrative so far. I can't wait to see where the story goes next.
Yeah, I mean, and that's always the hallmark of the Suikoden games. Even though the same kind of story beats happen from game to game to game, how it gets there and the characters and how that like changes the game, I think, is what makes it an enjoyable ride each time.
Suikoden is a beloved franchise, although it's been dormant for a while. John, what does this game do to capture the magic of its spiritual predecessors?
Well, I think we kind of already touched on it. The art style and the character design, right? That's key right away from when you start. You see that main character, and you're like, oh yeah, that's every Suikoden character, main character for forever, right? Getting into a little further in the game, right? And you start building out your castle. That's when it hit for me, because it's always my funnest part. Like, I'm gonna go run around old towns and like, oh, here's a person who's gonna run my shop, and here's a person who's gonna do this. And then they do bring in like the battles too, and I haven't seen much there from the large scale battles. So I'm interested to see how that expands and how much strategy's there. But yeah, it's same type of story. Same art style, same character designs, right? Fun dialogue. You build a castle with your friends.
Yeah, it's like, and it's just like the duel system. Like we've already had a duel that we've had with another person, and that's very similar to the old Suikoden games, where it's like you have to pick up the lines, and that's like the tell as to what it is that they're going to do, so you know what to do. Which I thought was a good one.
Was that in the first Suikoden game, or was that an innovation in the second one?
It's for sure in the second, but I'm pretty sure it was in the original Suikoden as well.
I think it was. I believe it was in the first game too. It's been a while, but if memory serves, it was in the first one.
It's not in the first couple hours, and I'd completely forgotten that was a thing, but when I got to that first instance, I'm like, oh my god, I forgot this existed. This is so Suikoden. I love this game.
Yep. And yeah, the battles, the way they do like the larger scale battles, that's like one thing where you see the modernization at work. And granted, I haven't played the later PS2 Suikoden games. I've only played the PS1 Suikoden games, and so I don't know if they did more of this type of thing, where you actually can do some of that. Because yeah, it was very bare bones in especially the first one, and even two, it was pretty bare bones when you got into the larger scale battle things. So that was pretty neat. I'm looking forward to running into a few more of those and seeing how that goes.
And Mike, where did you see the similarities to the predecessors?
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen, there are spiritual successor games. They've been around for a long time, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a love letter to a previous game series as blatantly obvious about, its themes and purpose as this game is. I mean, everything is out there. The art style, as you mentioned, the combat, the magic system, the recruitment, the cooking mini game, for goodness sakes, is. I mean, literally, they just like everything they loved about Suikoden, they're going to bring on back, and they're going to do again as best they can. I mean, just no hesitation, 100% in on doing that.
So how did this franchise fall apart? Because the first game was awesome. The second game was bigger and better. I played the third game and fell off shortly into it and never went back to the franchise. So, how did the wheels fall off?
Well, I do think they lost the thread a bit when the PS2 era came and it went to 3D. I think that really hurt them because I think they put too much work into trying to make it look like a big... I think they were scared by Final Fantasy and games like that, and they kind of went away from what was beloved in this area. I mean, did any of you guys play 3 much?
Few hours, but that was it.
I've owned it for ages, but I haven't played it much, yeah.
So 3 had...
played it a long time ago.
3 had, 3 main characters, and it did this thing kind of like Wild Arms, where you would start character 1's story, play for a bit, then switch to character 2's beginning, play for a bit, then switch to character 3's beginning, and then get them all together, and it becomes a one story. But the pacing was disastrously bad. I mean, the opening bits for each character were so long that by the time you get to the next character and went through his bit, you forgot what the first guy did, and then you do the third character, and you'd kind of forget what the first 2 characters were. It just, the pacing was broken, and a lot of the combat was too slow. There was some good stuff there, but it lost the magic. And then 4 was kind of like Wind Waker, where you spent a whole lot of time sailing around the ocean and had the same problems with way too much time just, watching your boat sail back and forth, is what I remember from 4.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that happened is Konami, basically, in that, Konami is the place where all beloved franchises have just withered and died. And only recently have they decided they didn't want to just do gambling machines and they wanted to actually start making video games again. And so I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, I believe when the team started forming to make this, they wanted to buy Suikoden from Konami. And Konami said no, because, it's worth too much as a franchise. I think one of the things that hurt Suikoden back in the day also is that it, like, Final Fantasy, exploded, and it just couldn't ever catch up.
Quick clarifying point, how is the franchise of Suikoden so valuable if they're never going to make a game of it again?
The funny thing is they are now. They're doing remakes of Suikoden 1 and 2 that are going to release on Steam and consoles. Was supposed to release last fall. I think they pushed it out to this fall now. So they might be getting back into it, but they would have to create an entirely new team to be able to do that. Maybe that would be the team that's working on remastering these, and it's hard to know if they're going to go through and remaster 3, 4, and 5, or if they're going to start making their own thing kind of stuff. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to fall together. But so yeah, I think that's a lot of what it was, and then why the series or the type of game has just kind of laid dormant, because Final Fantasy exploded in popularity. It became kind of the mind share. You had Persona become resurgent in that time also. So a lot of other franchises kind of built up, and Suikoden kind of got forgotten, even though it was a very unique style of RPG with some interesting mechanics. That it's kind of like the Nemesis system with Shadows of Mordor, where you're like, when that happened, everybody was like, oh, everybody's going to make games that do stuff like this, and then nobody does. Now, granted, that's because WB patented it, and they wanted lots of money if anybody wanted to do anything with the Nemesis system. So a little bit different there, but so yeah, I don't know. It will be interesting to see if Eiyuden kind of sparks that resurgence, if Rabbit and Bear Studios is able to continue this franchise, and then if it comes up at Konami, it would be interesting to see if there's a little bit more of these types of games happening a lot more in the future.
Also, did I misspeak in the beginning of the show? I said this was made by 505 Games.
They're the publishers of it, but Rabbit Bear Studios is the company that developed it. So, and it was founded by, I think, the main creators of Suikoden, and then formulated a team around that, because most of them, because I know the person who originally did a lot of the writing on Suikoden left after 3, and then did a lot of freelancing stuff, and then that's when they started to reform this studio in the late 2010s. And right before the game came out, Yoshitaka Murayama, who is one of the main creators of Suikoden, passed away. What was it, 3 or 4 weeks before the game came out? All the writing and stuff was done, but yeah, that's kind of a bummer that happened. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts, maybe if there's going to be sequels or different iterations of this moving forward.
Sure. Well, Bernsey, we have another month coming up with this game. The Final Fantasy expansion is just about to drop. How much time are you honestly going to find for Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes in the next month for our Part 2 discussion?
I don't know. I really want to get through the game. I want to get all 120 heroes. I have, 17 to 18 hours into the game so far. Mike said he spent 80 hours into it, so we'll see if I could get that in the next month, with Dawn Trail taking up a lot of time, and knowing that I've got a lot of Begoma to play if I'm going to if I want to get all 120 heroes to try to get the true ending. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm going to give it the old college try, though.
Well, what are you hoping for out of that time?
I'm just hoping that it's enjoyable and that a lot of the sort of style and characters just continue to flourish, and that some of that doesn't get muddied when you end up getting all these other people sort of surrounding everything. So I'm really curious how that continues, because I think they've done really well with how they've balanced some of that in the early parts of the game, with different characters kind of becoming a little bit of a focus at times, and also doing some really interesting things with when you have characters in your party saying lines and how that comes out. So yeah.
And Mike, I'll turn to you next. You managed to finish this game before Shadow of the Erd Tree came out, but say you'd been only a quarter of the way into the game when the Elden Ring expansion came out. Would you still be playing Eiyuden Chronicles with us through the completion, or would you push it in the trash for the shiny new expansion?
Eiyuden what? I have no idea what you're talking about because I'm playing Shadow of the Erd Tree and that's all there is to it. But thank goodness I don't have to do that, because that was intentional. I pushed pretty hard because I wanted to get that game done before tomorrow. That was one of the main reasons I definitely was pushing hard to get through the story and stuff. And then at the end, I spent a good chunk of time near the very end just trying out the side stuff and, kind of trying to... I wanted to get all 120 characters, but I did not succeed in doing so.
And I hope you'll join us next month for our part 2 discussion where we can be more spoilery. But if avoiding spoilers here, were you satisfied with the overall arc and how everything came together in Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes?
Very much. I will say this, without being spoilery, I thought the game just kept getting better as it went. I was the least happy with it about 5 hours in. And I just, once it kind of clicked with me, it just kept getting better. The characters keep being interesting, the new characters. I think some of the best characters in the game don't show up until way far into the story. And it's that, which is really nice, because it just makes recruiting so much more fun when the guys you're recruiting are people that you're really going to, enjoy having in your party or enjoy having in your town. And they really did a great job with that. So I say, hey, look forward to what's coming up.
Well, that's awesome. John, are you looking forward to what's coming up? Like, how invested are you in Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes? Given that, we're busy, you and I both have kids, like, what are the odds that you see credits roll in this game by the time we record roughly a month from now?
Yeah, it's going to be tough because I know I got a lot to go. If I'm going to be looking at 50, 60 hours, I know I'm not going to get the full super awesome 120 character ending. Right, that's going to be a YouTube thing, but I am going to try and push to get as much as I can here. Hopefully, I don't reach that point where I'm like, okay, now I'm just going to bounce off because it's reached the point of boredom. Being able to play on my Steam Deck, right, streaming from my Xbox is nice, and that will probably keep it going for me at least until the end of next month, and then we'll see. That may be where it stops because there's new shiny things that I might want to try.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar boat. Like, I'm now enjoying the experience, and I want to see how far it gets, and especially if there's some fast travel that alleviates the long dungeons in between, like, breaks. But we'll see.
I'm also really excited to see what ends up happening with more of the characters from Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. I know there's been a couple that have popped up so far in the game, and that's been a treat to hear them speak, instead of just reading their text in there. And so I'm really interested to see how more of them pop up as we go through the game.
Yeah, me too. Like, they're building up all this stuff for Lena. I'm like, oh, good, CJ's coming. Cool. I'm excited to see CJ. I didn't finish that game, so I don't know what happened with CJ, but, like, Garou pops up. I'm like, all right, there's my kangaroo dude. That's not what I remember his voice sounding like.
Because his voice didn't sound like anything in the first game.
Well, it was very different in my head then.
No, if you finished Rising, there's actually, when you first see Garou, there's a really good payoff. There's a really good payoff with that. So I think that's pretty neat. I won't explain it because of spoilers, but I can tell you guys off air. But yeah, I thought that was really neat. So I'm excited to see what they do with CJ and Isha. I mean, I'm excited to find out how to pronounce her name because I'm not sure exactly how they do it. So yeah, so that's another thing. And going to New Nevea, that'd be kind of cool to see how it's represented in this game compared to how it built up in the game that I played before it. So yeah.
Yeah, those would be fun tie-ins. Anything else you guys want to discuss about the first part of Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes?
I guess one other thing is, unfortunately, the game has had quite a few issues with bugs, and I have heard that like the Switch version is like nigh unplayable, which is unfortunate. So if you're interested off of what we were talking about, I'd recommend like any of the other versions of the game. There's been some issues here and there, but it feels like with every update, things seem to have smoothed out. There's some weird jittery things with the graphics at times, depending upon where you're at on a map. But for the most part, things I think perform pretty well now. And there's some moments where there's different areas of the game where some stuff just looks like really pretty. Like there was one time where I was at a certain part in the hideout and there's like a waterfall kind of in the off to the background, kind of up in the edge of the screen. I was just like, that water just looks really cool. I mean, it wasn't anything major, but it just like I stopped and looked at it for a little bit. And it's like, that actually looks really good for like what this game is doing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good things with that. The music's awesome. I like the voice acting, even though Tom hates it with a burning fiery passion. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's lots of good here.
I mean, mostly I just hate Francesca yelling at the end of battles. I'm sick of hearing her say it. Stay down. But I would note that, Burns, you're playing on PS5. Mike, I presume you played on PS5. And John and I are both playing on Game Pass. I'm on the Series X. John, are you on the X as well? Yeah, I've noticed next to no issues. The only thing I've noticed is that quick resume doesn't work particularly well. So like, oh yeah, John's shaking his arms. You lose some progress there, my friend?
No, I haven't lost any progress, right? I mean, my quick, we didn't talk about it, but like this is old school, right? Save points, everybody, right? So coming from something like, Octopath Traveler, where on a Switch where I can just push a button and stop and go, it's awesome. And autosave's a galore. But the bigger issue I have with the quick resume is that if you do quick resume, I get back in every time, but the sound doesn't work. So I will get in, and I will be like, okay, I gotta I'll stop streaming on my Switch, and I'm like at a point where I'm like, I'm ready for bed, or I gotta do something with the kids, or this or that, and like, hey, I gotta pause, right? And then I don't come back until the next day, so my Xbox does quick resume, and then I'm like, well, great, now I have to play for the next 20 minutes till I get to a save point with no sound, or I'm going to lose everything I just did. So I do play a lot of the game without sound because of that fact.
I think also the autosave I don't think works. My last autosave was from like well before the battle at Eltisweiss, and so it's like I don't even know what the point of it being in the game is if it's like hours before my most recent save. So yeah, I don't know. There must be something wrong with that they need to fix, or maybe my playthrough it's just not going to be fixed. It's probably just stuck where it's at. So I don't know.
It's an interesting autosave. It only saves like when you leave towns, and like I think when you leave a dungeon, or maybe when you go into a dungeon, right? But you definitely should have had one by now.
Yeah, because there was one moment where there is a length of time between save points and like multiple cutscenes and multiple battles and multiple like all sorts of other things. And I was like, I got to get out the door here. So I chanced it. I paused the game, exited back to the menu, put my PS5 on rest mode. I came back. I was right where I was at. I was like, okay, I really didn't want to play through that last hour again and go through everything one more time. So I lucked out there at least.
It's one more thing like the original Suikoden's, right? You're like, hey, I'm away from a save point. I'm going to leave the PlayStation running and hope that my mom doesn't come in and turn it off, right? I'm just going to turn off the TV, right? For any kids listening, that's what, quick resume was back in the day. You just left your PlayStation on, right? Completely on powered up game running, and you just turn your TV off. And then when you came back, you turn your TV back on, and hey, look, I'm right exactly where I was.
Quick aside, what is the most ridiculous way you use that system to continue any kind of game?
Like to turn TV off or quick resume?
To turn the TV off and like leave the system running and hope that nobody turned it off.
Oh, probably my NES, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that there was games I just left my NES like all day. Like I'm gonna play like 10 minutes before school and let it sit there all day, right? And then come back and hope my brothers don't turn it off.
For me, it was a friend and I were playing through NHL 97 or 98 on PlayStation 1, and he didn't have a memory card. And we played through an entire season without turning it off, which we got through in like a week, but like he literally had his PlayStation on for an entire week.
There was one time when I went to my parents' place a few years ago, and I was there for like an extended weekend or whatever, and so by this point, the magnets or whatever have gone out of the PlayStation 2 memory cards. And so it's like, I really wanted to play Guitar Hero. And a lot of the songs I like to play are like the things you unlock when you finish the game or as you're finishing the game. And so I played through all of Guitar Hero 2 to finish all the songs. And it's like, okay, I'm going to leave this on. Hopefully it's still there so I can play the songs that I want to play later. And luckily my parents, didn't notice that it was still on and the TV was off and input was changed back to, whatever they were going to watch. And so, but it's just like, I don't know, playing with fire, I guess. Or otherwise I just wasted all that time for nothing.
Mike, you have an example?
Well, see, back in the day, we rented things like Nintendos before we, could afford to buy them. And we basically would never turn those things off because we didn't trust the safe, the password systems necessarily. So yeah, if you rented a Nintendo on Friday, that thing pretty much stayed turned on until we took it back on Sunday. And, it wasn't ours, so we never really worried about it. What the heck?
Well, and some of those games, those passwords, it was like, just like 8 lines of random numbers and letters to write down. It's just like, what are the chances I'm actually going to be able to decipher my handwriting to be the exact right things and re-input it? Like, yeah, that stuff was hot garbage.
Yeah, we left it on just because you're playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and if you don't trust the password and you don't want to go back through everybody, you just have that thing on.
Yep.
All weekend.
There was, I think it was Spider-Man Separation Anxiety, where you could play as Spider-Man and Venom. They had a password system, but it only stayed up on the screen for a little while. And I was playing it with my oldest brother one time, and we didn't get the password completely written down in time, and he just lost his GD mind. Like, he is screaming profanities at the top of his lungs. And, like, my mom thought somebody was being murdered. It was awesome. And with that, we're going to wrap up our discussion of part 1 of Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes on the OiO Game Club. Thank you so much for listening to this standalone episode. I hope you'll join us next month for our part 2 discussion. I also hope you'll jump in and play with us. Please consider supporting Outside is Overrated at www.patreon.com/OiO. That's patreon.com/OiO. And until next month, stay inside, kids.